Cooper, and welcome to the new 100 Longevity Campaign. Today's show is going to be so powerful. I can't preface that enough. It's actually one of the most valuable shows to date, and they've all been valuable. Each guest has brought so much to the table, but this one in particular is going to be extremely eye-opening, especially if you or a loved one is dealing with cancer. And the reason why I'm saying this is our guest is one of the leading cancer experts, doctors in the world. He's Dr. Jason Williams. He's the founder of Williams Cancer Institute, and he's been doing cutting-edge treatments that are currently in clinical trials right now in the US. He's been doing these back since 2002, so he is like light years ahead of the pack. And for the past 6 years, in fact, he's been in Mexico City so that he can actually do these advanced therapies to be able to show real results that are treating cancer. And it's not with what you would typically think when you hear about treatments for cancer. So it has nothing to do with radiation or chemotherapy or cutting the cancer out. Nothing that invasive. It's a cryoablation with immunotherapy. And what he is doing is light years ahead of everyone else. And it's interesting why it's not being shared as an option, because cryoablation has been around for a long time. So I can't wait to introduce you to him. Just have a pen and paper handy or rewatch this episode again, because I can tell you right now it's going to be a lot. It's very powerful information too. So let's get started. Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate being here.
Well, we're so excited to have you on the show. I think this incredible information has to get out to the masses. You are the book author of The Immunotherapy Revolution, and I have to tell you, it was insane the amount of information was in there. It was just mind-boggling. So please share with all of us, let's start at the beginning. Share with us, what is the immunotherapy revolution?
Sure. Well, I think the big thing with the immunotherapy revolution is right now, all the understanding of the immune aspects of cancer is just, it's at a pace that's just unmatched. I mean, I would say that each year we learn more than we knew in the entire history prior to that. So things are rapidly changing. And one of the things is that unfortunately, a lot of the information is not getting to the patients. The medical community is very slow to adopt things. And my experience in the past was that really when we had new technology, it was better to get that information to the patients and let them push the doctors than the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was part of the concept of the book. I spent about 3 years working on it. The first year, though, I wrote a textbook essentially that was designed for doctors. And then I realized, no, this is only 10 people will read it, and it's not going to help anybody. And so one of the things that I realized with patients getting immunotherapy is that they were missing out on a lot of opportunities to enhance their success. And that was kind of the main concept of the book, to talk about those things that patients can do themselves to help their own treatment.
I haven't heard of immunotherapy before, and most of us in the mainstream hasn't either. So not to dumb things down, but just maybe share that translation first to help us understand the concept.
Well, one thing I'll explain what kind of the main concept of immunotherapy is and what the reality turns out to be, which really when we learned how things really worked was when immunotherapy became effective. So the main concept before is that you're using a medicine to stimulate the immune system to attack the cancer, or something that may bind to the cancer and make the immune system recognize it better. But what really turned out to be the key point in this was that the immune system, in a lot of cases, wants to attack the cancer, but the cancer is actively suppressing it by activating receptors that shut the immune system down.
There's T effector cells that attack drones, and there's T regulatory cells that give that cell permission.
Yes, and that's the thing is that so when you look at the immune system, you can kind of divide it into two pieces. So you can say the side that will attack things or attack cancer, and the side that actually protects your own body, but also that protects cancer. So what cancer really does is it hijacks or it hacks your immune system to work for it.
Right.
So,
It
and a lot of
disguises
people
itself.
it does, and well, all the other thing is that you'll hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I need to make my immune system stronger." Well, that's not always the case because you actually might be making the part of the immune system stronger that's protecting the cancer. So you actually want to discriminate how you make your immune system stronger. And so with that ability to block those receptors, that was really when the real revolution of immunotherapy started because before it's like they described this as a car, and so when you're using the immunotherapy that's the newer things now, you're removing the brakes, so you're allowing the immune system to attack it by blocking those receptors.
Right.
Before, everybody just wanted to throw fuel on the fire, step on the gas, but as I said in my book, you can step on the gas all you want, but if you have the brake fully applied, you don't go anywhere. And so you needed that concept of first removing the brake. So those are what we call immune checkpoints, and by blocking those, that can actually allow the immune system to see the cancer and attack it.
Okay, so I guess I'll have to ask this. Cancer's been around for a very long time, for centuries. And I've heard of like people who've never smoked before, but they get lung cancer. Or what is it? What is the reason we get cancer?
Yeah, so there's kind of, you can sort of break it into two sort of things. So there's genetic. Now, it doesn't mean that you always inherit it. It could be that a gene that you have gets a mistake. So think of this like when copying. The genes, they have them listed as letters, just like you would have in letters in a sentence.
Right.
And so imagine though, with all of these genes, I mean, you've got, 23,000 genes and they're copying all the time and they're very long. Every now and then there's going to be mistakes. And sometimes a mistake leads to something bad, or sometimes it deactivates a protein. So it doesn't always mean that the mistake causes something bad to happen. It could just cause something to quit working. There's a lot of things that can lead to that, environmental factors, toxins in the environment.
I
Um,
always wondered about that because there was an area that a lot of people at this one school, which, gosh, I hope that I'm wrong about this theory, but that a lot of people were getting cancer. The teachers were getting cancer
mhm,
at, that worked at this school.
sure.
So you feel that it could be an environmental thing?
So there's several aspects. Environmental certainly can be one, and obviously not everybody's exposed to significant toxins. But I was the other thing, of course, is getting into the diet. I mean, honestly, our food is, as some people describe it, they say our food is weaponized.
Oh
And,
no.
and one big aspect that we look at is the microbiome, the bacteria in the intestines, and how that affects your immune system, how that can either help you keep from getting cancer or could even cause you to get cancer.
Yeah.
Our foods are actually destroying our microbiome, making us more susceptible to cancers.
Yes, and that gut health is actually one area that has been well publicized. To have the pre and probiotics and to eat a lot of fiber. So that actually is an important factor to not get cancer as well.
Except for sometimes it's a little more tricky than that. So I'll tell you kind of one interesting fact with actual probiotics. So these are the ones that contain bacteria. So there are some instances where if people have like Crohn's disease, that a probiotic may reduce their chance of getting cancer because a person with Crohn's actually has a higher chance of getting cancer. However, if you give a patient who has cancer probiotics, we actually see some of the cancers grow faster.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's two aspects. You always have to think that prevention and treatment are not always the same. So, I wanted to mention that just so that people who actually have cancer, they shouldn't necessarily just take probiotics and without having some real guidance in what they're doing. Prebiotics, though, actually is different because prebiotics they're not actual bacteria. They actually enhance your own bacteria. You increase your diversity, which is associated with a better immune system.
You actually have a whole chapter in your book on the microbiome, which is so incredibly valuable, and you do a whole testing process. So tell us about that.
Yeah, one of the things that's been shown in several studies is that if a patient's microbiome is bad, meaning not diverse, which you see a lot nowadays with the common American diet, that immunotherapy for those patients doesn't work at all. I
Mm.
mean, you're complete. These drugs are super expensive, and you're wasting them on a bad microbiome. So that's the foundation. And what we do, of course, we do microbiome testing to look and see.
How long does it take for your microbiome to get boosted?
About 6 weeks.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you would create a protocol for your patients prior to doing any treatment. In
Right.
fact, you have a pyramid system and microbiome is at the baseline. So tell us about your protocol.
Yeah. So basically, we check the patient's microbiome. We look for key factors. So there's two main bacteria that we're looking at are Akkermansia mucophilia and fecal bacterium prausnitzii. Those
Ugh.
are both are
I would need phonetics for that, and I still
not.
wouldn't get it right. So,
One of the things now with like artificial intelligence and machine learning, we have these abilities to take patients who are treated and we look and see the ones that had success, what was different about them than ones who failed. And you start looking at their microbiomes because, of course, these things are tremendous. I mean, you're talking, there's trillions of bacteria, and you pick out and see, okay, the patients who did well commonly had a higher amount of these bacteria, and that's what was found. um, the reasoning is that these bacteria make something that enhance your immune system is ultimately what it comes down to. And
wow.
so, and they're not available in probiotics. You can't go buy, either one of those in a pill. You have to increase them naturally. And so that's where substances that are like polyphenols are good for increasing the Akkermansia, and kiwi extract is very good for increasing the Prausnitzii, and so we use
Okay,
those.
so we're going to put up on the screen right now so that y'all can take a screenshot of this to be able to supplement ways to increase your microbiome, not just for cancer, but just in general perfect health to optimize health, correct?
That's true. So that's the other thing is that a lot of these same things could be used for patients who are people that don't have cancer who really could actually prevent their chances of getting cancer. And it's important now that we see the big offenders that I find in patients' diets. One is any artificial sweeteners, particularly Splenda.
What
Um,
about Truvia?
so that one's not so bad.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's the one I take because I realized that artificial sweeteners were bad, and it says it's from the stevia leaf.
exactly, exactly. So it's natural and it doesn't seem to cause it.
So
Not,
that was fine.
not, not to say we can't always say that because it's natural, it's good, but but in general, but when you look at Splenda actually functions like an antibiotic in your intestines.
Oh, lovely. And one of the other ones that you mentioned for preventative measures is selenium.
Yes, so that's the thing, and this really intrigues me why this is not like common. Not this should be taught to like kids in school,
Huh.
young girls. We talk about all the other aspects of life, but yet there's some studies that indicate that selenium may reduce the chance of breast cancer by 50%.
That is mind-boggling that we don't know. Mainstream hasn't been told this, so why are we in the dark about a supplement that will reduce our chances for cancer 50%?
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea. And the way that I found out was actually there was a doctor that did a study that showed when patients were getting immunotherapy and if they started to fail, if you gave them selenium, then a high percentage of them would respond again. And so I thought, like, well, this is amazing. Well, it turns out selenium obviously has a lot of function in the immune system. And that's probably where a lot of the prevention lies, where you're actually keeping the immune system primed. And if you can keep it primed to where you prevent cancer from occurring, well, then you're much better off than having to deal with fighting cancer.
Yeah, so get it into your system, but not overkill.
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
And that's an important thing with it with selenium is that there's the window of what's good. And so certainly, I hear the same thing. Three or 400 over that actually becomes detrimental. 3 to 400 micrograms being your maximum. What you want to make sure is that what you're supplementing plus what would be in your diet would not exceed that level. And the diet amounts of selenium vary depending on regions because most of it is dependent on what's in the soil. And so if you're in an area where the soil is very rich in it and it's various pockets, then you probably need less selenium.
Okay. So while we're on the subject of various things that you can take, one thing you mentioned to me, which I just was like mind boggling, couldn't believe it, is you told me something about aspirin. So let's tackle that one first and then we'll get to the next one.
Sure. Well, so aspirin or what we call non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, they have some powerful anti-cancer aspects. They reduce an inflammatory response that actually is kind of pro-cancer, and so we do know that taking baby aspirin is associated with reduced colon cancer risk. We also know that patients who are getting immunotherapy, if they take aspirin or another NSAID, that their chance of success is actually enhanced, potentially up to 30%.
So
And then,
baby aspirin, like one a day?
so yeah, it depends. So if you're only in prevention, it would be one a day of a baby aspirin. If you're cancer treatment, you're going to take up to 1,000 milligrams a day. So it's a
Wow. You mean while you're receiving cancer treatment?
exactly, yeah, exactly. Since it enhances the success of immunotherapy. So
Okay. But I know that taking a baby aspirin is recommended when you're on a flight because it prevents blood clots.
sure, sure, yeah.
Most people don't know that, but I actually do because I have one portion of factor five. Not
Yeah,
two, but one. And so my blood, like, I don't bleed like for an extended period of time. It just like, it clots up right away. And so when I'm flying, I'm always like, I'll pop a baby aspirin because I know that I'm more prone to getting blood clots. And so, but that's insane that, it could be acting as a supplement to take on a daily basis, just as a preventative measure for a number of various illnesses and things that could go wrong.
yeah. I think the big thing certainly is the with the baby aspirin is the colon cancer risk, the reduced colon cancer risk. But certainly in cancer treatment, that's a whole different deal and much higher doses. And then of course there's the side on patients who are getting biopsies or even cancer surgery.
Okay, so in my notes, because I was sharing this with a good friend of mine who is a nurse, and I was sharing with her about the if you take Ketorolac previous to right before you get the biopsy, then it prevents like the spread of cancer to go to other
That's
places.
right.
And that's crazy. Are you saying that if you do a biopsy on a cancer tissue, does that actually increase your chances of it spreading?
It unfortunately it does, and and this has been debated for a while, and honestly, I have to admit, I've done thousands of breast biopsies and other biopsies, and patients used to always ask me and say, "Oh, is this going to increase my risk of spread?" And I'd be like, "Oh no, it doesn't, because that's what we thought." Well, probably the most definitive study was done from John Wayne Cancer Institute, where they showed that it actually caused cancer to spread somewhere between 13%, possibly up to 50% of the time.
How long ago was this?
That was like 12 or 13 years ago at least.
Okay, so we've been sitting on this knowledge for that long and nobody knows to request, or the doctors don't know to provide. Is it called Ketorolac?
Yeah, which is it's a non-steroidal. It's a little bit more powerful than aspirin, and it's injectable. So
So why specifically that?
because it's sometimes used as a pain medicine for anesthesia. And so what they found was that the patients who got that for pain had less metastasis. And so that's where it came from.
This is so we have been sitting on this knowledge for 12 to 15 years.
Exactly.
Nobody knows. And it
And
doesn't matter if it's breast or any other organ. It just,
that's right. Even with cancer surgery. And so, what happens is a lot of times I'll tell the patients this and they tell their doctor, and the doctor say, "Oh, I can't give you ketorolac because of increased bleeding risk." Well, okay, there's a little bit, but when you look at it, I checked the incidence. The increased risk of bleeding associated with biopsies and surgery for Ketorolac was less than 1%. And there were no deaths.
Oh
No
my,
deaths.
okay, so if my doctor, if I wanted to say, now that, anyone watching the show and they have to do a biopsy somewhere and they say to their doctor, hey, I was told that this is something I should be taking, and the doctor doesn't believe them because oftentimes the doctor is like, I know what I'm doing. I'm the doctor, you're the patient. What do you do?
Right. So, there are some published studies, and there's also reports in the media about it. So you can even
Oh
find
my
that.
gosh, trust me, the reports in the media got buried because nobody knows about this.
Well, you can still find it if you search on Google and search Ketorolac and biopsy
But
or
you have
anything.
to know what you're searching
Yeah,
for to even
exactly.
find
You
it.
do. You do. But that's how, like, when the patients ask me, and I tell them, to try to convince their doctor, go with the papers and say, hey, look at this. Now, tell me why we shouldn't do this because this is the data right here.
What do you recommend instead of doing the biopsy so that you can prevent that from happening?
Yeah, so this is the problem is that, of course, nowadays we do have liquid biopsies, but they're not reliable enough yet to replace a regular biopsy. So you have to do the things that you can to minimize the risk of the cancer spreading from the biopsy itself. So ideally, the doctor would administer it to you when you were getting your biopsy. So you would get it injected.
Simultaneously.
Exactly. I mean, we actually take it a different step. We actually inject it into the site.
Wow.
That when you biopsy something or surgery or anything like that, you're creating an inflammatory response and a healing response to the tissue that actually supports the cancer growth. So what's been found is that if you take a patient who has a tumor, you biopsy it, and you measure the person's blood, then let's say there is no cancer detectable in their blood. If you biopsy it, then you can detect significant cancer in the blood immediately because it showers into the bloodstream.
Right, so it kind of wakes the area up.
Yeah, but what normally would happen is the cancer would go all over the place, but it can't really survive well. It doesn't usually land and survive. However, if you've increased these growth factors, those can actually support it. So then it can land, and then it gets those additional growth factors that support it, and it grows. And the other thing is that what they find is that sometimes the cancer will hitch a ride on your platelets. And so, by some of the drugs like aspirin that inhibit platelets will actually reduce the ability for the cancer to move around on these platelets.
Oh my gosh. So, any other supplements to prevent cancer, or if you have it, to reduce the risk of it spreading?
Yeah, so I mean, there's several that are very popular, but I will say that the data starts to become mixed on those, and so one is curcumin, very very
Oh my
popular.
gosh, Sandra Kaufman. That's one of her top 5 tier on episode 1. If you missed it, be sure to check it out.
Has several effects. Like obviously, it's shown to decrease cancer growth. It has some positive effects on the immune system as well, and that's why it's and of course also it's popular like in anti-aging. I mean, it has many
It's
many.
got a lot of things, including anti-inflammatory, antiviral. And
Yeah,
in fact, it made the COVID list that Sandra had shared with us. And we're
yeah.
in a pandemic here, so all the help we can get. So I'm curious though, you made a mention of something about the immune system boosting that sometimes has a negative effect. So if you took curcumin, would you be okay?
Yeah, yeah. So that's one of the things that we looked at. It seems to enhance more of the cancer attacking side than it does the cancer protecting side. One of the things that you have to keep in mind is that when you want the immune system to attack cancer, now again, you have to kind of separate between preventing cancer and treating cancer. I'd say that's an important one, and this goes on both sides, whether you're treating or preventing, is sulforaphane. If a person is only doing it for prevention or anti-aging, because actually shown to be anti-aging as well,
Yes.
then I would do 500 milligrams a day. If
Okay.
it's a patient that's active cancer treatment, then they need probably 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams a day.
And again, that won't deter them having a negative effect to increase their immunity.
Oh, no, though that actually enhances immunity. The one thing that cancer patients have to be careful with, if a cancer patient, let's say they're getting chemotherapy, well, then you start getting drugs like curcumin or drugs that can have some antioxidant type effects that can counteract your
Right.
chemotherapy. So you don't
You're
want to take,
killing it with the chemo and you're enhancing it with the supplements. So it's like butting heads.
yeah, you're
Okay, so
protecting.
let's talk about treatments that you are doing because I think it's incredible work that you are doing. Um, when did you choose to practice in Mexico City because
Sure.
you weren't able to do these advanced therapies here? And tell us about this work.
Yeah. So, originally all this work, I was in the US. The big thing that I was working on was these ablation techniques, putting these needles into tumors and destroying cancer with heat or freezing. And one of the things that I first witnessed about 18 years ago was that in a patient, we've actually heated up their tumor, destroyed it, but they had cancer elsewhere in their body, and everything went away.
Hmm.
Even though we only treated one tumor, the patient wasn't getting any other therapy. So then I realized, okay, this did something to stimulate the immune system to attack
Yes.
all the cancer. So then I began trying to figure out what could we do to make that happen all the time. So I practice and I still maintain some work in the United States, but as things kind of advanced, we started realizing that injecting these immunotherapies into tumors was much more effective. And there's a few issues with doing it in the United States. One is that if you really want good effect, you need drugs that aren't approved. The other is that insurance doesn't cover this if you do it in the US. And it makes it challenging because hospitals aren't going to really let you do a lot of procedures that aren't covered by insurance, even if the patients are willing to pay. A lot of the studies are indicating that if you freeze the tumor inside the breast, that you're actually stimulating the immune system to attack it. So you would reduce the chance of the cancer ever spreading as compared to surgery. And so cryoablation is the future for breast cancer treatment, and of course, it's cosmetically superior as well.
Right. Okay, so tell us, it's comparable, like the same effectiveness as doing radiation and chemo and
So yeah, so there's a few breast cancer studies that have been done. Sloan Kettering has one that was very interesting with cryoablation of the breast using immunotherapy, much like we do, injecting into the tumor. I think they reported 99 or 100% cure in like 30 patients.
how long ago was this?
That was 3 or 4 years ago.
3 to 4 years ago.
Yeah,
Where
and
was the study?
it was done. It was published initially, and they expanded it to get a bigger study so that they could put out, because a lot of times they don't take much stock in these studies unless you have like 10,000 patients.
Okay, but the same effectiveness by doing just the cryoablation, not even the immunotherapy with it.
The same or better. So you can say at least at worst it's equal.
How long does the time frame lapse between doing the treatment, the cryoablation, and then seeing to remain cancer free? Like, what is that time frame? What does that look like?
Well, so technically, for any cancer patient, when you treat them, to be truly cancer free, to be considered cured, you have to maintain 5 years without any evidence of metastasis or recurrence.
Okay. And so, in one instance, like, so if the cancer is in a lymph node, for instance, as well as the breast, how would that work?
So we do where we actually will treat the breast and the lymph node. So we'll freeze the breast lesion and we freeze the lymph node.
Okay. And 93% effective without doing, again, people, chemo, radiation, or removal of breasts.
Yeah, that's the big advantage
So
of this.
why are oncologists not offering this?
Yeah. So this is the thing. They need obviously one thing, they need bigger studies, and there's a lack of funding behind it, because you're now talking about when you treat breast cancer and you do surgery, radiation, chemo, that's on average at least $250,000. Whereas you're replacing it with a procedure that may be somewhere between $5 to $20,000.
Okay, so you're
Better
telling
results.
me that it's a money game?
It's a money thing, almost certainly, because nobody is putting money behind it, and whoever does the studies obviously controls the narrative.
Okay, so God forbid if I ask this question and then I get a really horrible answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So there's organizations that are driven to help people like women, breast cancer victims, Susan G. Komen, and all of those. Why is this not common knowledge, at least given to, from their site to women?
Sure. Have you ever looked to see who funds Susan G. Komen?
No,
Pharmaceutical companies fund the majority of Susan G. Komen.
no way.
Yeah.
So you're
Most
telling me that they would instead, the pharmaceutical companies are telling them not to share the information?
Well, they're going to do whatever's going to make whoever funds them happy. Whoever gives you money is who you make happy. We do the same thing, honestly, in scientific research. If somebody is funding our work and they want us to do a study and make them look good, then we can do it in a way to make them look good.
That's disgusting.
That's what's done.
You've been doing cryoablation since 2003.
Right.
So you're in Mexico City. Anyone listening right now that doesn't want to travel to Mexico City, are there doctors just like yourself that are practicing here? Because that is available.
So there are doctors doing just cryoablation of the breast in the United States. So there's they're a little bit more restrictive on what they can do, but there's one in California, there's one in Florida. So there's a few options for patients who have early stage breast cancer to get this in the United States.
And the ones that you're talking about are ones that have been also doing this for a number of years. They know what they're doing. They're aware of.
I think they've been doing it for 2 or 3 years, and they were part of some of the clinical trials.
Well,
So
I would want to go to you if I had, if I had to worry about this. This would be like my first plan of attack. I wouldn't like. So tell us about what happens when we come to Mexico City. What does that look like, and what does it entail?
yeah, and one thing I will mention is that say a patient sends us their stuff and they could be treated in the U.S. We a lot of times will refer to there. We take on the more difficult cases or and let the easier cases be
Right,
done.
and this would be considered the easier cases because this isn't what you're doing now. This is a cakewalk compared to what you're doing now. You're doing advanced next level therapies in Mexico City. Cryoablation has been like practiced by you since 2003.
Yeah,
The question still, you didn't answer this, is why is it not even being made an option when you are in that doctor's office and you find out for the first time that you've got cancer? Why is this not even, information shared with the patient that this is something that is a treatable option?
yeah. So and this is the thing that happens in the hospitals. Let's say you have a clinical trial, and this has happened to us where we would try to do a clinical trial with cryoablation. And then the hospital would say, well, there's a pharmaceutical company that's offering us more money for the per patient to do this other drug study instead of doing cryoablation. So again, the studies are done where the funding comes from, and there was a study for cryoablation that was called the Frost trial, and very successful, but still relatively small numbers. And so your oncologists, your oncologic surgeons who are not doing this are going to say, oh, well, the data is not there because we don't have 10,000 patients. And if you have 10,000, it would be, well, there's not 100,000. That will never be the equal number of patients that have had surgery. They want to say, oh, that you've done at least the same number of people that ever had surgery and it was better. Well, that's going to take forever because, obviously we've been doing surgery in the breast for, 50, 60 plus years at least, if not
Okay.
longer.
And I know we're only talking about breast cancer right now, but I'm assuming that cryoablation is perfect for any form of cancer.
It could be used in many other cancers. Of course, now, the techniques that we have with injecting immunotherapy, we don't even have to do cryoablation in a lot of these cases. We can just inject the drugs, stimulate
Tell
them.
us about that next. This is what the cutting edge stuff is. So let's go into that next.
It is, yeah. So one of the things now is that we have drugs that will kill the cancer directly, stimulating the immune system, and then all these other drugs that cause the immune system to attack it. And the technique that we developed was basically what we do: we take a patient and we inject several drugs into the tumor, and the patients who failed, we would bring them back and we would add on another drug. And you keep doing that until you get something that works in a high percentage of patients. And that's where we're at now. And of course, right now, of course, also we're trying to build up the numbers so that in a period of time, maybe a year or so, we can come out and say, okay, look, here we are. We've got 100 out of 100 patients that we treated that all are cancer free. So,
Okay. So would you say what is your percentage of treating patients to like being cancer free?
yeah. So, the one thing again, keep in mind is that you got to have 5 years on these. So,
Oh, so you've only been doing this for about 5 years.
with immunotherapy,
Mexico City.
yeah. So, well, we started in the U.S. with it. So we actually have 6 years. So we do have some patients that are now 6 years. But when we started in the U.S., we were only doing like 10 patients a year.
Okay.
So our numbers were relatively low. Now we're picking up. Now I think we're probably 140 patients a year, and so we're getting more numbers. And the thing is that keep in mind these are stage 4 patients. So in
Oh,
stage
no, you didn't say anything about that yet. So you're
exactly.
talking stage 4?
Yeah, because that's where of course the real need is, because stage 4 patient, they're considered incurable. And so what our goal was is to get cures in stage 4 patients.
I realize that it takes 5 years to completely know the data, but what has the percentage been so far?
Yeah, so right now, and of course, so we've expanded to where we're using almost 8 and 10 immunotherapy drugs injected into the tumor,
Ooh.
done over a 1 week period, a series of 3 injections, and getting complete response somewhere about 60 to 80% of patients, depending on your cancer type. So pancreatic.
60, wait. Let me just say this just to clarify. 60 to 80% effectiveness in
Yeah.
stage 4 cancer patients.
Yeah. So one thing is I say almost all patients see shrinkage. Almost all. There's a probably I would say certainly 90%. But the big question is getting rid of their cancer for some period of time. That's where we're seeing somewhere between 60 to 80%. The big question is, will it last?
Right.
So we have a few patients like a year and 2 years ago that we treated. We got complete responses that relapsed.
Here's where they had the relapse.
So breast, and we treat a little bit more, but like triple negative breast cancer. But the patient we treated, and this was an interesting case because we actually presented it at a big meeting and published it. Was that the patient had breast cancer, but it spread to the bone and the brain and the liver, and we actually got a complete response, including the brain. Now that is something that usually never happens.
Wow. And how long ago was that particular patient's treatment?
1.5 years ago. She relapsed recently, but only in the liver and in some lymph nodes, and we just retreated her again. Of course, the thing is that even though we retreated her a year and a half ago, the therapy she got today is significantly better than what she got a year and a half ago, because we're continuously improving. Basically, if you can find any clinical trial, any drug that exists, we can use it. And what we do is we combine all the best of the clinical trials together, but do them in one, injected into the cancer.
So you're creating a cocktail, an elixir of 8 to 10 therapies.
Right.
And these are on the market or in clinical trial?
Some are on the market, some are in clinical trials. So it's
Okay. And so how do you decide which ones, because you said that there's different ones, which one is going to be the most effective for that person?
Yeah, so now of course our techniques of predicting are getting much better. So we use a combination of DNA, of RNA, of the staining of the tumor, looking and seeing what receptors it expresses, and we're learning a pattern of, okay, if the cancer expresses this particular receptor, then we must block that to get a response. And so it's getting very sophisticated. of course, we're involving artificial intelligence and machine learning into this process, and so
Oh my
uh,
gosh.
our predictions are getting good. That's why I think in a year we probably could be at a 90% complete response. I would hope that those will be all cures. And what I want to do is basically fill an auditorium with our patients and say, look, this is what we've done. But the thing is that basically, as I tell the patients, we treat you till we cure you. So we treat them. If they fail, we bring them back and we add on more drugs.
So you're using your patients that you're treating as the human trials that we would call human trials here in the US. So you're collecting their data while treating them. So you're killing two birds with one stone, but accomplishing the feat and being able to bring it to market, so to speak, while you're collecting the data, which is genius.
It worked out. I didn't plan it. It just happened that way.
Well, I find that things that happen organically often is the best fit. So, how much research and patience do you need to show the data to be able to bring these therapies to market?
Yeah. So that's a good question. That's an area where I've really been kind of thinking about recently because normally in a clinical study, you would need tens of thousands of patients probably to make people happy. So now, of course, I'm one doctor. These are procedures. These are, I mean, it's, doing surgery. You can't really do high volume things.
Right.
I can't
One
treat
person.
can't treat 10,000 patients. I mean, our process is it's long. I mean, each procedure can take 2 hours plus. We actually so for each patient we usually do at least 3 injections over a week period. So the amount of volume that we can handle is not tremendously high. But the thought is that if we could get just a decent number of patients and with 50 or 100 patients to say, okay, look, these people are all cancer free. This is their story. I think it would be very impressive, but it wouldn't change the scientific community.
Why would it not change the scientific community?
Yeah, they're going to want to see much bigger numbers than that.
But it's not theories, they're actual results. I mean, you have found viable solutions to cure cancer. So,
One of the big problems with the clinical trial on this because we have in our groups sort of approached the FDA on various ideas of clinical trials. They're not very happy on combinations of numerous drugs, and so they
why is that?
well, usually what happens is the combinations occur from approved drugs. So one thing, each drug needs to get approved on its own merit. And then the other thing, of course, is that when you want to do a clinical trial and you've got 8 drugs, you could have 8 different drug companies that don't want to work together. They may say, we don't want our drug mixed with their drug. You
Uh,
know, so, right,
Politics. Okay, so are they in an IV? Are you shooting it directly into the cancer?
directly into the cancer. And that's the only way that you can use that many combinations of drugs. Because if you gave it to the patient IV, it would cause their immune system to attack their body.
Oh, wow.
So when this is what happens, and this is the key concept, and it's really just catching on now. I mean, people are really starting to believe in this. Is that you can inject into a tumor and you can cure the cancer. You could completely if you inject a tumor in the liver and they have cancer in their lung, their bones, or their brain, the cancer can go away just by injecting one spot. You teach the immune system in one location, it goes away everywhere.
That's insane. So, this is so incredibly valuable. So, you're telling me that you've already seen this?
We have we have the patients, and that's the thing is that we're gathering more, and that's one of the things that's kind of important to us is to try to get the numbers. As I tell the patients, I'm like our number one thing is to get a cure on these patients. I mean, obviously we want to treat as many people, and we try not to do like cancer centers do a lot of times, like MD Anderson might pick people that are higher percentage chances so their numbers look good. And we try to give options to more people.
How does it affect the brain if you're just injecting the liver?
Yeah, so the main concept is this is that you're not treating the cancer, you're treating your immune system. You're teaching the immune system. So if you teach the immune system to attack the cancer in the liver, it will also attack it in the brain.
Oh my gosh. That sounds so like stupid simple,
Yeah, I
but
agree.
Okay, so
Yeah.
tell us about the drugs that you are using to do this cocktail of injection.
Because there are, with certain patients, cancers, depending on the receptors they have, depending on, the DNA, because we actually can predict what the cancer is like based on their DNA. So we know certain drugs to use just on what mutations they have.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so the way that it works with genetic materials, DNA is your blueprint. So imagine you want to build a house. So that's your plans. That's what it's telling you what you're going to build.
Right.
Whereas RNA is really kind of, as well, I would say it's almost like what you actually are going to build. So sometimes your plans might not be the same as what you built.
Right.
And so what happens is that the
So it's the
DNA,
difference between the architect and the actual builder. And I know
yeah.
this because my husband's a builder.
Yeah. So RNA, the one thing that's nice about it that we can use is that, let's say there are certain genes that are being expressed at a high amount, but they're normal. Those growth factors, for example. So we can see that those are being expressed at a high amount. That's different than the DNA where you're looking for changes, mutations. This, you're looking at what of the actual genes are being used. So then okay, that cancer is making a lot of this protein or making a lot of that receptor, and that's predicted from the RNA. It's actually, honestly, the most helpful of all.
Wow.
But you do kind of know from the DNA, you can kind of profile the cancer. So just like they do this profiling of criminals.
Yeah.
So a crime, they say, well, this person probably lives alone, does this, does that. So we do the same thing with the cancer. So we see certain mutations and we say, okay, it's probably expressing these receptors, it's probably doing this and that, and we know how to treat it based on those things. And that's where we make our predictions, and we're getting really good at it. I mean, so,
That's
and
amazing. Can we mention some of the drugs that you're
sure,
using?
sure. So the one drug that we use that I would say is kind of famous in the fact that people research it is a drug that's called OX40, and it's actually combined with another drug that's called CPG. And so OX40 activates a particular receptor on T cells. CPG looks like kind of like DNA, but it's DNA segment that you would normally find in bacteria. So the immune system recognizes it being bad, and so when it
Okay.
sees that into an area of cancer, the immune system is drawn to it, and then the OX40 activates those cells as they arrive. And so that was made famous as the Stanford cancer vaccine. So Stanford showed 100% cure in mice injecting it into the tumor. And so
How long
that's
ago was that?
2018, January 2018.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's a positive for what you're doing.
Yeah, so we're not the. I mean, we're the only ones doing humans in
Right.
this way, and with this.
Which is insane that you're the only ones doing humans, but that's the problem right now is to getting these advanced therapies to be approved by the FDA for human trials. So you've worked around the system. You said you didn't even plan it that way, but you managed to like make it happen. How much do these treatments cost?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, and things can vary depending on which drugs. But let's say you're using the maximum amount of drugs, so using 8 to 10 drugs, then each injection that you do is going to cost somewhere between $25,000 to $30,000.
Okay, well, when it comes to your optimized health and curing a disease and extending your life significantly and all of the above, that seems like a drop
Well,
in the water. But let me ask, obviously, there's no insurance that's going to cover it. So it's an out of pocket.
it is. Yeah, of course, you do have to compare. So, again, one thing is that most patients are going to need up to 3 injections, so that's going to be times three. But then compared to the price of the drug, so we use one drug called Yervoy, which is FDA approved. That drug costs about $35,000 a dose in the United States. Opdivo usually costs $10,000 to $15,000 a dose, but you need those drugs every 2 to 3 weeks. So
Oh,
imagine what the cost. So the cost become $500,000 to $1 million a year per treatment for cancer for a drug combination that doesn't work nearly as well as what we do. So what we do is actually a tremendous cost savings. And what patients would find is that they would probably pay less with us than they would spend on their deductibles.
that's insane. I keep saying that, but I'm just like, so I love your analogy in your book that your country is your body and your president is you. So go ahead and share with us all of this because it just breaks it down so easily.
So one of the things, of course, is that cancer, infiltrates your body. So just like the concept of like a terrorist organization infiltrating your country, and it can actually disguise itself because it is part of your own cells. So you can imagine it's not like you can identify the person by how they look because they look like your own body. And the other thing is that they can use your own normal cells to help them. So it's kind of like having groups of sympathizers within the country. And and you have the minister of defense would be essentially your doctors, your medical team telling you what to do. But you as the president have to override or decide what's best for you. If what they say you don't agree with, then you can rule them out and go with your own way.
Correct. The plan of attack is definitely to inject directly into the tumor, the cancer tumor, as opposed to using an IV. And there's clinical trials that are happening right now that you said that are like things that you did 10 years ago. And they're not giving you that option. It's only through an IV. So you said that they're not even going to be effective.
Yeah. So that's the thing is that I mean I hate to keep demonizing the drug companies, and I'm not going to say that they're all bad, but obviously they have their own business interest as well. And so the concept of if you could take less of their drug but make it more effective by injecting into the tumors, obviously that doesn't go very well with their business plans. And so yeah, a lot of the studies that are being done, like for example the Stanford study, and this is something that you can look at. When Stanford published their data on mice, and of course it made world news, everybody thought, okay, this is the cure for cancer. Then when Stanford actually did the study, they changed it and started giving the drug intravenous instead of injecting it into the tumor. And then they said,
Wait,
oh
wait,
well,
wait, wait. They changed. So the mice were getting it with an injection.
they were into the tumor.
So when they decided to do the human trials,
They switched it. They did a bait and switch.
so and it wasn't effective.
It wasn't as effective. It was effective, but not as effective, which they already knew because in the mice they actually did systemically, so intravenous essentially, or into the tumor. So into the tumor they got 100% cure. When they gave it systemically, intravenous, they didn't. I don't remember what percentage, but it was like 30-40%.
Was this
So
done with a drug company? It can't just be Stanford.
they're all supported by drug companies. So.
Oh my God. I'm getting quite an education, and so are all of them. So I knew it was bad, but I didn't understand like all of the different variables involved, which is really, really, really disheartening because you would like to think that your healthcare providers are looking at your best interests and providing you with the best care as possible. And yes, I have known for a long time, just like everyone else, that we are in a sick care system and not a healthcare system. But I didn't realize how deep that goes until just now.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things, and there's some things that unfortunately I don't. I think I would be afraid to tell you.
It's already getting to this really dark place.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, that's not what this show is about. This show is just to be able to share the information to the mainstream to let them know what their options are. So just share with me what you can.
well, so I mean, one of the things obviously with patients that are getting immunotherapy, the microbiomes are being looked at, and it was found, of course, that patients who had less diverse microbiome that they did not respond very well to immunotherapy. And so of course, one important aspect of that is that patients are missing out on an opportunity. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something that you could fix. Sometimes patients need a fecal transplant. Sometimes they need something very aggressive, where you actually take stool from a patient and put it in another person. And what was actually shown in studies, if you take stool from a patient who was successfully treated with immunotherapy and transfer it to another patient who's getting immunotherapy, then their chance of getting success was, I mean, it was significant. I mean, I think it was like, and it, well, these are small studies, but like
Right.
24 out of 26 patients.
Incredible. But again, so this is not common practice or common knowledge.
Not. And so, when you start looking at it, so fecal transplants are not done for cancer patients. The FDA has actually outlawed them
Why?
because they're trying to develop a pill that does the same thing instead. They are focusing on a pharmaceutical route.
Okay. Okay, so is the FDA, well, I thought the FDA is not funded at all with pharma. Is that correct?
Actually funded by the people they regulate. So that's their state. You can look it up, their statement. they're
Okay, wait, okay, just wrapping
not,
my head,
they're
just
not,
wrapping my head around this information. Just want to make sure I've got this straight.
yeah. So essentially they're funded by the approval processes. So for example, if you want to get a drug approved, you're going to have to pay certain fees to the FDA. And that's where FDA funding comes from.
So I was under the impression that it was funded by the federal government.
It makes it sound that way, doesn't it?
Okay, so no wonder why the system is broken.
55% was from the federal budget, so from the government. 45% was paid for by industry.
What's industry?
That's the pharmaceutical industry.
That's the pharmaceutical
It's
industry.
the industry, yes. So, but this is the thing: if you want to get a drug approved, when this is how you eliminate the small players. So, what does it take to do a phase 3 clinical trial?
Yes, please share that.
I think the FDA fees for a phase 3 clinical trial are at least $250 million. So it's like administrative fees. Gives you an idea there of, I don't know what type of administration they have
Oh
for each
my
drug.
gosh, this
But
is so bad.
that eliminates the smaller groups. And one of the things the FDA, I remember about 8 or 9 years ago, a person from the FDA had made a statement. I was shocked that they actually said. They said that the FDA has not and will not ever approve a drug that's not from a major company.
They actually said that.
They actually said that, and basically the rules are set to where it would make it impossible. And what do you see with a company? So somebody develops a drug, for them to take it up the chain to get approval, they usually have to either work with or sell out to big pharma, because big pharma is going to look and say, okay, this drug looks good, we'll buy it. And but the person, like if I have a drug myself and I'm going to develop it, and the only way I can get it approved is to partner with big pharma. You can use government sort of regulated methods to reduce your competition. It's smart for your own business. I mean, every big business is going to go that direction. And I think, unfortunately, that things have been kind of set up that way, and it's hard to change it. Even and there could be plenty of individuals. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if the head of the FDA wants to change this stuff.
Right.
So
So what's holding them back? I feel it's public opinion because the public's been kept in the dark, and I'm hoping that once the public is aware, then it's going to create a snowball effect. It's an injustice, really, truly. It's an injustice to us that this is not available, since you all have been sitting on a lot of this knowledge for a long time. You've actually put it to good use, and you're doing these advanced treatments. What do you need to make this happen?
yeah, that's good because obviously the approaches that we take, of course, are like research through regular university, and most of that stuff never really gets to an FDA or federal level, because what happens to us is that we have a plan and we need to get funding. So
Yes.
that
Funding
usually
is a common thread. Funding has been like a broken record with every single one of the guests. Funding is where they're stalled
yeah.
because what their work has not been shared optimally. So people, it's shrouded in skepticism, and it's not valued the way it should because the information has been hidden. So nobody really understands how valuable what they're sitting on is. And so the funding doesn't happen because it's like a catch-22.
Yeah, our hands are tied in the U.S. Our hands are tied, we're running with bricks tied to us as well. So we're slowed down, which was the thing that was frustrating because for me to use 8 and 10 drugs injected in the tumor, the way that I would have to approach this in the United States, I would be dead before we could get approval
So
for
would
that.
we all.
It
And
would.
everyone dying of cancer that is
Exactly.
stage 4 and has no knowledge of what you're doing up until right now. Now that at least they have some option. So, okay, so let's get back to how does it work? So, how long does it take to book for your treatments to happen in Mexico City?
Yeah, so a lot of it also depends like on our how busy we are at that time. So certainly things have been picking up, and most patients, it can be 2 to 3 weeks before I could even review their information
Because you're one person.
on one person. But I'm the one that has to be the main guy to say,
Yeah.
yeah, no. So
That's why we're doing this interview on the weekend, people. It's because he's a busy man.
especially I still was at work today. I mean, I came from the hospital.
My next thing is to close this out is if there's anything that you could ask of us to help you further along, what would that be?
So we did start a foundation, which is actually Williams Cancer Foundation. That's really designed to support intratumoral immunotherapy research and to fund treatment for patients who can't afford it. Particularly, I have to admit, it leans a little bit more towards children than adults because obviously that's it's a very difficult situation it's bad enough for adults, but gosh, these kids, it really tears you up to see it.
It breaks my heart that we have to go to this extent to leave the country in the United States
Yeah.
to be able to receive treatment for our optimized health. I am doing this series about creating a longevity mindset, and why I'm featuring cancer, which to me is like not, that's a disease, it's not a longevity issue, but the way you're treating it with these advanced therapies and making a difference to create long life in these patients who had really no hope, to me is something I had to magnify and get that out to the mainstream so that they know what their real options are. What you're doing with these advanced therapies is so beneficial for optimizing long life that I had to have you on.
Yeah, I think for people to really consider to live 150 to 200 years, we need to solve the cancer problem. Otherwise, those people are going to get cancer and their lives will be cut short. As we tried to get official clinical trials done in the US, and we were told by one of the pharmaceutical companies, this was through Case Western Reserve, which is with the Cleveland Clinic. So I mean, this is a big institution that if, and this is what I was not told this by the big pharma. I was told from the person that I work with that they were told from the president of the university that somebody from one of the big pharmaceutical companies said that if we do a clinical trial injecting all these drugs into tumors, that they would make sure that Case Western Reserve and the Cleveland Clinic never had a clinical trial ever again, that they would be completely blackballed from all research and just destroy them.
And the reason behind that is because
They said that it wasn't that they didn't want this stuff to come out, but it cannot come out this fast. And it needs to be staged over 15 to 20 years.
that's what's so frustrating. This is heartbreaking to hear. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's very powerful. This needed to be heard. I don't think I want to sugarcoat anything, and I don't want to edit out things where I feel that it's too much. because it's going to empower the change.
Yeah.
So from the bottom of my heart, I really value what you're doing. I just want to stay strong to deliver the message and make sure that people are aware of what is going on. So I'm going to say thank you so much for everything that you are currently doing, and thank you for being on the show. What you've provided has been this wealth of knowledge. A lot of us are hearing this for the first time. Definitely I am, and it's extremely eye-opening, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the new 100. And thanks all. We got to do something to make the change. It's now more obvious than ever. All right, bye.
I'm not backing down, 'cause the future is now. Not backing down, 'cause the future is now.